and I just don't think it's written well. There are positives. What are some things that I love? We got a win. Okay, so in this vlog, we're going to be talking about some new releases. I have 3 new releases, one of which was already published and I've already started and I already love. And then 2 more that will be published very soon. I'm really excited about all of them. And so I figured let's talk about them all in one video and also go hiking. The last Phi Hunter was 100% a cover buy. I've never read from this author. I barely knew anything about the book going into it other than we're following X, a Phi Hunter, and there's also a pregnant woman involved. That's what I knew going in, and I was very nervous plot-wise, but I have enjoyed it so much. Okay, so right from the start, right from the very first chapter, it starts on page 7 and ends on page 13, ends on page 13, and it did so much because we start with a Phi battle between X and a Phi, so we get to see action right off the bat, but also right there in the first chapter, we learn that the Phi have all been human once, and the fact that they were once human is a big piece of what makes them so powerful. We learn that if they die, they actually become more powerful. That's when they're the most dangerous, is after they die. So you better make sure they bleed, you better make sure they stay dead, and they don't get back up. They die over and over and over again, and that's just their fate as the Phi. We find out that the Phi were humans whose life choices led them to this karmic fate. And X has an occasional companion called Hound, which in the next chapter or 2, we also find out that he's not actually a hound and doesn't like being called his pet, so please don't call him that. And he's definitely not owned by X, he just hangs around sometimes. I'm really, really curious about Hound. I'm 138 pages in. I'm really, really curious about Hound. But anyway, it starts off with action. It starts off with some really, really interesting establishing of world. We also really quickly learn that X is, when he defeats a Phi, he has to give, I think it's half of it, to his guild, and it doesn't pay super well. So it's in hacking the Phi the body parts off, like here's the stump of a foot or here's an eyeball or something like that, and selling off the body parts that actually is what makes him survive. So he's a little bit disenchanted by this heroic, amazing life that kind of actually has him as an outcast, and he has to use gray magic and occasionally has to encounter some dark magic, which is not, people don't appreciate that. Don't get around me with your dark magic. So that's his life. And then he meets a woman who is the prince's consort, and she is pregnant, and convinces him to take her to a certain witch to get some help. And he agrees begrudgingly, and along the way we meet other very interesting characters like the guardian of the forest. There's a certain deal that he makes and I'm waiting for that to come back around, but there's a lot going on in this world, and the world is the most interesting thing about this book so far. I don't feel like I know X super well. I don't feel like I know I don't know how to say her name, Arenia. I don't know her super well, even though I'm 140 pages in. I don't feel like I really know them that well, and there is a romance I guess romance is the wrong word. There's angst building here, and it feels very, like, I know they're grown adults, but I'm pretty sure they're teenagers. It's rough, honestly. I'm struggling a bit with that. But the world is so good, and that's what's keeping me extremely interested. That's what gripped me here at the beginning of the book, is the action and the world and the intrigue, and I have so many questions and I'm so excited about so many things that are happening, but more and more the angst is getting page time, and I just don't think it's written well, so it's gonna be great. I'm gonna love this book. Welcome to the vlog. something positive. The world building throughout the entirety of this book, I loved so much. I loved meeting the many different types of Fae. I loved going on this journey, going from place to place, seeing the world in this Thai inspired setting. There was Thai folklore tucked into the pages of every new place we went to in this novel, and it was so cool. From the different types of Fae to the rules of being a Fae hunter and how to navigate trying to protect the people from them, the important things that you need to remember, and the ways to go up against them. Honestly, I wouldn't care if this entire book was nothing but X and Hound traveling together through this world, hunting Fae, trying to get this advancement in his guild, and defeat this legendary creature, and what he learns along the way. I think that would be fascinating. And the scenes where we faced off against the Fae, when X had to maneuver and navigate and figure out what he needed to do, the very few scenes we got of him working with Hound were so good. And there were definitely implications of a lot more depth to X than we saw in this book. I actually don't know if this is the first book in a series or if it's a standalone, but there were implications to a lot of things that we really could have dug into in this book with X. But unfortunately, we didn't dig into much with him, with his motivations, with what drove him. I mean, we do know his motivations, but we didn't dig deep into a lot of stuff, into what shaped him, into his past. We got sprinklings of it, but it didn't go that deep. Hound was barely in the daggone book, and I would have just loved more pages of X working with Hound, because that was a dynamic that would have been, that was so cool and could have been so much more. And I would have loved that story of just these two exploring this world on this mission, trying to accomplish this goal. But immediately after the book starts, X's goal is interrupted, and it takes on the focus of X and Arinya, I'm pretty sure is how you would say her name. And honestly, who is she? I don't even know. I know a little bit of her backstory. I know that she used to be a fighter. I know that she has been the prince consort. I know that she now has mixed feelings about the prince. I know that she has this whole pregnancy situation that is very complicated for her and has informed a lot of the decisions that she makes in this book. But I don't feel like she was ever... Like, did she ever grow a personality? Because I'm not sure she did. And the romance in this book continued to be something that I didn't enjoy at all. I mean, I know these are adults, but I'm half convinced they're just pretending to be adults and they're actually teenagers, because this was so angsty. It was just a lot of miscommunication, stumbling around your words, not really talking things out, and then causing some unnecessary quarrels, them just fumbling over themselves, which is fine. Adults do that too, but it was not my favorite. And it was awkward to read a lot of times. Like, there was a scene where she had just yelled at him and freaked out over him using dark magic, and was like coming down from that, as well as being very emotional because she's postpartum and her situation is very complicated and there's just a lot going on. And then X, like, she looks at him a little bit longer than like your standard, like she makes eye contact and then doesn't break it. So X is like, it's probably time to kiss you. Or there's a scene where X gets his throat slit and he's described as like gushes of blood. He nearly dies. His whole body is covered in blood, according to the book. And then she's like, this is time to make a move. So she starts licking him, starting, I think, behind the ear or something like that, and then working her way down. And I'm just, in my mind, I'm just like, ma'am, you're drinking blood. Also, let him rest. And then he ends up turning her down in that scene, and then she argues with him about it, and they get into a little spat. And I'm just like, I feel like I've been invited to dinner by my friends who just started dating, and then they're playing the game who can make our guest more uncomfortable, and they're both winning. And my larger problem with the book is really difficult to talk about spoiler-free. The spoiler-free way to talk about it is that a lot of this book felt like scenes that were isolated scenes but didn't flow together really nicely. So a thing would happen, we would deal with it in that moment, and then we would move on, and then it was like it didn't feel like it was connected to the rest of the story. So it just felt like scene happened, okay, exit stage left, now enter back in for our next scene, rather than feeling like a journey, even though it was a journey book. And because of that, there were certain scenes that felt really weird to me because something very serious would happen and then we would just move on and like not talk about it or unpack it or come back to it or anything. And then they would talk about it in this way that I'm like, I don't feel resolved about that. How do you? Like, I'm not okay with what just happened. Why are we all acting like this was fine? Again, really difficult to talk about, spoiler free, but I did write quite the write-up on my Discord. And I know I mentioned I personally would have preferred the book if it had followed X's original goal with Hound, and that was the focus. And it's fine that that's not the way it went. Authors can write what they wanted to write, and this author wanted to write X's goals and plans being interrupted and going on a different journey than he was expecting and finding angst. Finding angst. I'm not going to say he found romance. It just wasn't for me. However, with all that said, I think that you may enjoy it if you're interested in a really killer world and you happen to enjoy some angst. You happen to enjoy some awkward nose bumping kind of romance. They don't bump noses, but I feel like that describes it well. And there are some scenes that I object to. There are a couple of scenes that I feel like it's fine that that's there, but also the way it was handled, I don't feel good about. And again, I can't say much more than that in a spoiler-free way, but there were just some things that kept knocking it down for me. So I rate this 10 out of 10 cover, 10 out of 10 world building, everything else, bit of a bumski. Hi, I have to leave in like 2 minutes, but that's okay because I have only just started this next book, so the check-in will be quick. It's called Letter to the Luminus Deep. Right away, I have regrets. So most books that I purchase secondhand, and I don't purchase a lot of books anymore. So I have a tight book buying budget, and so in order to read 3 new releases, I pre-ordered 2 because I have to buy them full price because I'm not going to have access to them from the library right away. So I pre-ordered 2, and then 1 I just did the audiobook for, and I chose the audiobook for the one that I was the least likely to enjoy in my mind. Regrets. So Letter to the Luminous Deep is epistolary. It's entirely epistolary. That's something that I could have known going into it, but I didn't do enough research because I like going into the books knowing very little about them. So that's on me. It's not the book's fault. And the audiobook is very well produced. They brought in multiple voice actors. They are very emphatic. They have a different kind of voice, a different type of tone. It's really, really well done. But for me, reading an entirely epistolary novel, which is a collection of letters. I'm reading letters written back and forth between characters. I should be reading it. Like, the experience, if you're not having a standard narrative thread that I'm accustomed to with the kind of books that I read, and it's going to be something that's the point is I'm reading an exchange of letters, then I should be physically reading the exchange of letters. It's me I'm talking about, not you. You may love this in audiobook form. It's a really well done audiobook, but I know that I'm missing some of the attachment that I would have to these characters, their stories, the tension of them writing back and forth and crossing things out, or not wanting to divulge too much, or not writing back quickly because of what's going on, or because of feeling like they didn't have enough to say. If I was actually reading the physical letters, I would be so much more invested in this exchange. So the audiobook is great. The audiobook is very, very well done, but I am having a hard time getting fully invested. Even with that, though, there are positives. What are some things that I love? I love the tone of the writers of these letters. There's multiple writers. I love their tone so far. Each one has a very specific voice, a very specific tone about them. The way they write, the way they express themselves is either, more on the formal side or very excitable, very casual. And I love that. I love getting to know them through their unique voices in how they're writing their letters. I'm enjoying the time period. I don't know what time period it's set in, but as of right now, here at the beginning, it feels very Victorian. It feels formal and old-timey beyond my years. It is a really uniquely told story, and it's very interesting, and as one of our characters lives under the sea and is writing about her experience exploring under the sea, my interest is piqued. I'm having a hard time getting attached to it, but I think that's a me problem. I am going to try to read more. I could run to the bookstore and pick up a physical copy of this, but I've already used my book buying budget this month buying a bunch of sci-fi books, which I don't regret. I just need to get over myself and get into the audiobook. I'll check in with you when I've read more. Hello, I'm in the parking lot of my climbing gym because I was gonna go rock climbing today, but all their auto belayers are closed and I came alone. So I didn't want to boulder because the last time I went bouldering, I snapped my ankle. It was just a super bad sprain, but I hurt my ankle. So I'm not gonna do that, but I did want to check in with you really quick because this might be my only chance to check in a little while. So I did finish Letters to the Luminous Deep. I put it down for like a week and a half, and finally when Silverblood Promise was about to come out, I was like, I really need to finish this or DNF it so that I can move on to something else when the next new release comes out. So I picked it back up and I sunk into it. I finally got charmed by it. I got used to the different characters. We do follow 4 characters. This is a romance. It's an underwater cozy mystery academic romance. So there's the 2 characters who are initially writing each other letters. They're very scholarly, they're very academic, they're researching things under the sea, they have a fascination with biology, and just a lot of really interesting buzzwords that you would think would be perfect for me. And then we follow their 2 siblings exchanging letters a year later after the romance 2 have gone missing. They've been gone for a year. We don't know what's going on. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to exchange information, and they're bonding as well. And there's a lot of charm to this book. I almost DNF'd it, and I ended up finishing it because I found it so charming in places. Getting to know these characters in this way, through these letters, through their shared experiences and bonding over different books that they love, or their shared love for their siblings, depending on whose letters you're reading, getting these discarded letters. This one didn't get sent, but here's what they said partially, or getting to see their thoughts kind of crossed out. I don't see it because I had to listen to it, but it's clear that they have certain thoughts that they've crossed out, and then they'll add a note saying, the only reason I'm leaving that there is so you can see how hard it is for me to address you casually, because it seems more appropriate to address you formally. So I'm leaving the formal cross out there, but I will choose to address you the way that you have requested. And there was a lot of sweetness to it, It was so long for what it was. I don't know that it needed to be this many pages, because truly so little happened, and I'm not even a plot reader. I'm very much characters, atmosphere, and there was a decent amount of atmosphere. I loved getting to understand the world that this was all set in, piece by piece, little by little, because of just small references that would be made in a letter, and just kind of putting that together was really charming. But nothing happened. And I didn't realize that this was going to be a series. I thought I was reading a standalone. And while I feel like I am at the end of this book and I've learned nothing, I know that I'm not going to continue on. So I will say, while this ended up not being for me, I do think that there's a lot of charm to it. So I would recommend it for people who enjoy reading through letters and piecing things together, piecing through a mystery, piecing through timelines, because we do hop back and forth between the letters exchanged between two and then present day between two, in the past between two and present day between two. So piecing together a story through letters, really strong personalities that come through in these letters, getting to see these characters, not so much development, but just progress. I don't know if that distinction makes sense to anyone but me. A book that doesn't have a lot of drive, there's not a lot of plot, there's no action, like there's not much going on in it until the very, very end, but you're just there for the cozy charm of it. And a really sweet romance, a really sweet nerdy romance, like I wonder what books are on your bookshelf kind of adorableness. So it wasn't for me. I wasn't the right reader for this particular book, but I think that it definitely has a readership, so if anything I said sounds interesting to you, you should check it out. I have started a Silverblood Promise, and I think we should normalize having floppy paperbacks as new releases. I'm really not a hardcover girly. I love me a good floppy paperback. I am 250 pages into it. I got this in the mail yesterday. It is so readable. Like, I knew I wanted to read this book relatively quickly because you know, vlog. I'm doing the new release vlog. I want to read 3 new releases, tell you about them, see if you might want to spend your time and money on them. But I'm reading this so easily. Like, it's so consumable. It's very detailed. There's a lot of world building happening. Like, I know so much about this world, but at the same time, and it is kind of info dumpy. I will say that. It's got its info dumps, especially through dialogue. And through thought, actually. There's a lot of just, here's what I'm going to tell you. Whether you want it or not, you're being told. But it's just, it flows so well, and while there's plenty going on, I feel like it's never too much. Like, I never feel like I need to go reread something or feel like I have too much to wrap my head around. It's just it's very, I want to call it fast-paced, because there's constantly progress happening, there's constantly something happening, but at the same time, it's extremely dialogue heavy, so that doesn't make it feel so quickly paced either, because like we'll have these really long drawn out conversations, but it's conversations of importance. Anyway, I should tell you what it's about. So the main character, Lucan, he was a bit of a deadbeat. He came from a family of notoriety. He had how far into the book? Okay, I won't tell you what happened, but a thing happened that caused him to be shamed, to cause a rift between him and his dad, and he kind of spiraled a little bit. And what does the book say that he did? Oh, okay, a dropout, and thanks to a duel that ended badly, the disgraced heir of an ancient noble house. Okay, so it's fine. So he's the shame of his family, especially his father, is basically how that goes. Has a rift with his dad, not going so well. Then the book begins, first of all, with teasing of searching for ancient artifacts. One of my big buzzwords that I've been really wanting more of lately, so thrilled about that. He also, very quickly on in the book, meets a young street urchin. He meets a young girl who is trying to pickpocket him, and he catches her, and then she ends up bargaining, talking her way into him paying her to bring him to someone who might help him do what he wants, do what he needs to do, what his goal is, which is to figure out his father got murdered, and it's to figure out who his father's murderer was. And I love her so much. Her name's Flea. She's my favorite book, and she's my favorite character in the book. She's so smart. She's so bullheaded. He speaks in a really educated tone. He uses a lot of big words. He comes from, you know, a noble family, and she's constantly just like, could you talk normal, please? And like, he'll want to leave her behind, and she's like, no, you won't be. I'll be coming. Like, she's such the boss of the two of them, and I love her so much. But anyway, he's trying to figure out what happened to his dad, and he has to, I mean, he needs assistance. He needs to find information, and that doesn't come to him easily, which means that he ends up in a bunch of side quests because he has to go compete in this thing in order to get this person to help him, or he needs to go do this thing in order for that person to give the information that he wants. And so there's constantly things happening, and he's kind of in in a way, Lucan is being kind of batted around by the plot, which I don't necessarily think is a negative for the book. I actually kind of like a world that's kind of dark and rough, and the characters are not the boss of the world. You know, like the characters are doing their darndest, but everybody around every corner is more powerful than you. So if you want their help, you're probably going to be played with a little bit. I would say it's entertaining me very strongly at this point. I'm not over the moon about it, but I'm having a very good time, which is a very good thing because this vlog really needs a win. I'm going to go get a coffee and then I'm going to drive an hour and a half home. Hello, it's late, but I wanted to close out the vlog with Silverblood Promise. We got a win. I really enjoyed this. So, Lucan, who's our main character, I will say, took me a minute to fully invest in him. While I'm sympathetic for his loss of his father and his complicated feelings about his dad, his complicated past with everything that caused him to be who he is today. I'm sympathetic of that, and I have no problem with a character who is at a dark point, who is, you know, a gambler, gets drunk, you know, all the things. I have no problem following someone who isn't the noble good guy, I guess is what I want to say. But I just didn't really feel like there was a lot of personality there, other than just like witty banter, you know, like he would sass off to everybody. So it took me a little bit, but I really loved the line, "Passion before reason," she said with a shake of her head. "That's your weakness, Master Gardova." That nothing could be more true. Passion before reason. That is Lucan, because he's clever. Like, he's smart. He thinks things through, but he's a bit of a dope. Lovingly, I say this. But easily the stars of this book are the side characters. Flea, who we already talked about, has just swept in and stolen the whole story, and I think that she will easily be a reader favorite. She's just so sassy, fiery, full of life. She's an incredible companion to Lucan, a great balance to him. Excellent banter. She balances his character out perfectly. There are other characters that we get as well, antagonistic forces, like characters that are stronger than Lucan, smarter than Lucan, more clever, more well versed in the games that need to be played, and they just kind of smack him around, and I love them for it. Like, there were several different characters that Lucan had to work with or had to deal with in order to get what he wanted from this story, and they were just like, I really enjoy following a character that does not have it all in hand. But also the world was really alive. There was a lot going on in this world, a lot of very interesting politics, monsters, creatures that we had to deal with, magic that wasn't huge in the story, but that was very intriguing and potentially very dangerous depending on how it's used and how careful you are with it. Just a lot of really fascinating characters that played really interesting roles in the story. Honestly, this book, I keep saying how readable it is. Almost the entire book is told, even though it's a third person perspective, it's almost exclusively told following Lucan. He is our main focus. So because we're not, for the vast majority of the book, we're not bouncing around in a bunch of different POVs. We're not bouncing around in timelines. It's just while there's a lot going on, it's a very smooth through line story. So it just reads so quickly. And because there's constantly stuff happening, it's a story that keeps moving. I never wanted to put it down. Like normally I wouldn't read a book this big in this short of time, which I had planned on doing anyway, because I wanted this to be in this vlog, but it was so easy to do with this book because it was so interesting. I never wanted to stop reading it, and it was fun. It was just really, really fun. I'm sitting at 4 stars, I think, right now, though it might be a 4.5. I need to think on it. I'm kind of tired. I don't know. I think if I were to issue you some complaints, one, at the beginning, there's some info dumping going on, a decent amount of it. It wasn't terrible. I've seen worse, but it was there. Too much plot armor. There were too many close calls, too many by the skin of his teeth sort of scenarios. This is a really dark world, and you definitely read like a dark world, but it didn't always function like a dark world, or as dark as it seemed like it should, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I'm wording that well, but it was, I think there was too much plot armor. What else? Oh, you know what? Here's my other complaint, and this isn't Logan, the author. This isn't his fault. This is probably the publisher's fault, but since I made that video about book blurbs and kind of ranting about how useless they are to me as a reader, since then people send me book blurbs all the time that they read and they're like, that's what? Why? So now I pay even more attention than I used to. And this isn't, I don't know if this is considered a blurb, but the comp authors on this book, for fans of Scott Lynch, Nicholas Eames, and Joe Abercrombie, Silverblood Promise is an unmissable epic fantasy debut packed with winning banter, thrilling twists, and blockbuster action. I agree with the second sentence. There's some great banter in here, thrilling twists, blockbuster action. Absolutely. I think all of that is super valid. I think saying for fans of Scott Lynch, Nicholas Eames, and Joe Abercrombie is a little bit misleading. The world, I think, is a good comp for Lynch. In my Discord, I called it Lynch Light, and I call it that lovingly, but just because like Scott Lynch takes things so much farther than this book did plot-wise, but world-wise it is very Lynch reminiscent. Nicholas Eames I don't see so much, and Joe Abercrombie, I think that's setting the wrong expectations. So I see some things that are Abercrombie-esque. I think that's setting the wrong expectations for this book. I might go more with a shucks, I've forgotten his name, Foundry Side author, Robert Jackson Bennett. I would go more with that as a comp author possibly, but I would say take those comp authors, I mean it says for fans of, but take that very lightly. I mean I think you should always take a book blurb lightly. Anytime a book is saying for fans of the Hunger Games or for fans of A Song of Ice and Fire, always take that lightly, but take that lightly. Very good book. Very Sleepy Murphy. Good night. Thanks for coming to my vlog. Bye.